And then finally, I would suggest one last thing is look for commercial insights. Look for the insights that help support the data that supports your argument, that makes you think about your product differently. So saying something like, stating something that is already obvious isn't necessarily going to be data that's going to support your claim. And so you're going to want to find really interesting, insightful evidence that changes the way that people think about their business. And the last thing, and I know because we're going quick on time, the last thing I'm going to talk about here is how do you assess the strengths of an argument? And I would offer you to do this exercise. Write up an argument for why should someone buy your brand? Why would someone choose it? Why would someone choose a product? Write them out as fast as you can. Brainstorm this stuff out and debate them. Remember, the debates create better ideation. And then do this simple idea. You go ahead and score each of your arguments and you say, how disruptive is it? Give it a 1 to 5. Is that argument really disruptive? Is that claim really disruptive? Number 2, is it differentiated? Can someone else make that same claim? And finally, what is that evidence? What is that defensibility that we have? And remember that warrant, that defensibility has to be a part of why that claim makes sense. And that's it, right? So I think if you really take a look at like all of your value props, all of your positioning, all of the claims that you're making, and really think about not just what is the evidence, but what is the reason that someone believes that evidence to be true. All right, and that's it.
There you have it. Nail your positioning through argument theory. Eric, this was awesome. I enjoyed it more than you know. So thank you for that. If anyone has additional questions, feel free to write them in the chat. By the way, Christina says, great session as well. So it's funny because, when we talk about being marketers, we constantly talk about doing the research, talking to your customers and, nailing your ICP and understanding more about the data. But you're raising a very valid point around, yes, you should do that. But also there is a moment of, synthesis, like where you need to think through the data that you have to get to a place where you can have a statement that can resonate with your audience based on evidence, which I find very, very fascinating.
Yeah, it really shows up. The place where it pops the most is you look at customer case studies.
Yes.
Often we do case studies that we try to back end into some sort of value prop.
Right.
And so the customer is saying this, and we're trying to say this, and then we just kind of make it work. But you know it when you read it. And so I think case studies is one of the first places where you can really begin to look at it saying, are we making an argument that is coherent, that really resonates with our ICP or the other things that we're trying to push through?
And I think the key point that you were hammering on more than a few times is that warrant part, right? Like what is the thing that you need to believe to be true for this statement to make sense?
That's right. It's and if you can do it, boy, like it particularly sales, the best way. How many times have we created marketing decks that sales never uses? Because they inherently know this, like especially the really good sellers, the ones that only use whiteboards and napkins to make their sales. And so the best way, the way I look at it is if sales believes my arguments, and which is why you always partner with your sales teams to do this, and you guys can argue that out. You'll ask them, like, what is the best way? Like, how do you persuade someone to buy? Don't tell me features and benefits.
I believe that is even more always been relevant, right? To some degree, but even more so these days when as a society, you find people that believes all kind of things and polarize in all kind of ways. And so you have to find a common ground to have those conversations, like the things that, you can believe to be true.
That's right.
Interesting. So the difference between arguing and debating, what is that?
Well, I actually put it all in the school of rhetoric.
Okay.
So I think a lot of people hear argument and they think of contradictory. And there's a link in that thing. There's a wonderful Monty Python skit saying, I'm looking for an argument. It's like, this is an argument. It's mere contradiction. No, it isn't. Yes, it is. No, it isn't. Yes, it is. Right. And so you want to avoid
I had this feeling already.
That's right. And so, with argument theory, like, there's so much you can do in rhetoric. And if people who want to read about it, there's a book called Rhetoric by a guy named Aristotle. It's been around. Yeah. But, he talks about means of persuasion.
Might have heard of it.
Yeah, that's right. Like, you can persuade people through ethos, like, hey, I'm your doctor. You should believe me. You should have it by pathos, like, hey, I'm a really good person. You're a good you like me. So that's another way of persuasion. Or logos, like the logical structure of an argument. And when you mix them all together, like if you try a pathos argument with a judge, like, hey, I'm so sorry I was speeding, judge, but I'm a really nice guy. He's like, whatever.
Here's your fine.
That's right. And so we have to, as marketers, we have to construct like the emotional valence, right? Like, is this a brand that I connect with? There's a lot of brands out there. Like when I go buy a car, there's so many brands I just don't connect with. It may be a really good product. I just don't connect them. And then you have the functional affinity. Those things are just pathos, ethos, logos, right?
Would you say that the best companies and brands have all those elements, or would you say that you have to pick one or two and like really nail those down?
They do. We use all three all the time, but you have some brands like in tech, we tend to use the ethos logos a ton. We just sit there and say, here are the 5 reasons that you should believe this to be true. And that's it. And we kind of forget
making the world better.
Yeah, that's right. And we forget that even in B2B, it's an emotional, like, do I resonate with this brand? Do I resonate with this company as a person? Because this is a risky decision by making this purchase. Right. And I think B2B marketing skips over the pathos piece. And then you have people like, if you think of like Apple, where Apple is not a category leader in any product. Like they're not number one in phones. They're not number one in music. They're not number one in computers. They're not number one in anything. And yet they have this giant market cap, which is all to do with the way that they've created that brand affinity. Mm-hmm. And so they have this pathos, right? It's like, this is a brand I have an emotional valence with. And I can tell you, they didn't do that just through creative. They did that through understanding the arguments that their ICP really wanted to hear.
Conscious effort on their part.
That's right. In fact, one last point it's really, this is like critical, is remember the argument to persuade someone else isn't the same argument that persuaded you to believe it.
Right. On this note, Eric, thank you so much.
Thank you. That's so great.
It was incredible. If anyone wants to connect with you, they can find you on LinkedIn, I'm sure. Thank you so much.